Hey, this is Rob Kwan with Unrig LA, and I'm joined by Ann and Tony from Ground Game LA to talk LA City redistricting. It is 9:30 a.m., and you apparently find this stuff interesting enough to pregame with us, which we are very grateful for. The Redistricting Commission is in the midst of a public hearing process. This is the fourth and final public hearing, but they are beginning initial conversations about amendments. It's getting all kinds of messy. There was an array of big developments this week in LA City politics and LA City redistricting. So with that, the biggest news is something entirely unrelated to LA City redistricting. Mark RidleyThomas. And with that, I will hand it over to Ann.
Yeah, thank you, Rob. So our beloved MRT has been charged with conspiracy, fraud, and bribery. This is a case involving his son and USC. There's a great LA podcast episode if you want to do a deep dive about that. But how this affects us in redistricting is that after Nuri Martinez, the city council president, he is the most powerful city council member. He's a former chair of the board of supervisors. So he has made a lot of people happy in the past. He's also on the rules committee along with Nuri and Joe Buscaino, who is on the outs with Nuri. So it will be interesting to see what happens with that committee. Also, though, MRT coordinated a $114,000 contract along with council members from CD 8 and 9, MRT is in CD 10, to figure out how to make sure that the redistricting process continued to uplift Black voices, which is, though, also an end run around the Redistricting Commission in some ways. So one outcropping of that is that there's been less fighting over economic assets between those three city council districts. But his indictment is happening right at the moment when these maps are about to be turned over from the Redistricting Commission over to City Council, who is the body that ultimately decides, a body of the City Council. Then they send it to the mayor, who can veto it. So he is now has lost power, arguably, and this power vacuum could affect what happens where we go from here. Yeah.
I think the biggest thing with Mark RidleyThomas is that we've gone this whole way trying to figure out Koreatown and where this giant important puzzle piece fits and keeping it whole.
Yeah.
And it's been placed in Council District 10, and there's been some worry. I've shared it, that maybe Mark RidleyThomas would cut up Koreatown when it gets to council. And now you have to wonder, is he going to have any political capital at all to do that? And is he even going to be part of council in those meetings when they actually happen?
Yeah.
Will anybody outside of Mark RidleyThomas feel compelled to spend their limited political capital on something outside of their district? All very fascinating.
Right. And important to note that he has said he's not stepping down. So he wants to stay in this fight.
So when it comes to LA City politics and scrapping things up, there's a new fighter who has entered the redistricting chat.
Choose your fighter. That's what I heard when I saw Jackie Goldberg on the screen.
Yeah, with that, Tony, do you want to tell everybody about our brand new commissioner?
Oh yeah, we got a new gladiator in the arena. So Nithya Raman, right before the last public meeting, replaced one of her appointed commissioners, previously Alexandra Su, with Jackie Goldberg, current LAUSD school board member, former assembly member, former member of the LA City Council, legend in LA progressive politics, going all the way back to the 60s. And it very quickly became apparent why, because Jackie Goldberg took the mic and ripped the process to shreds. She said, I have been in 4 redistricting processes at every level. I have never seen one like this, where decisions are being made behind closed doors, where it is claimed that certain things are going to be decided at the last minute. And she said, and we all know that when things are supposedly getting decided at the last minute, that just means they're already decided, because what's left over is what's left over. And, there could not be a better illustration of how things are being run and what she's describing than the current map, which has 2 districts, both of which are described as either District 2 or 4. And, of course, what this is about is that the Redistricting Commission, or the most powerful parts of it, have been carving up Nithya Raman's district, sticking virtually all of it in the valley, cutting her off from her base in the sort of Silver Lake, Echo Park, Los Feliz area. They've now got just like a ridiculous little sliver to include her house in Silver Lake, which is then attached to Griffith Park, which is then attached to the entire rest of the district up in the valley. And the reason you bring in Jackie Goldberg is because you can't shut her down. Previously Alexandra Sue and other people have tried to raise the, issues about what's going on. And the chair of the Redistricting Commission, Fred Ali, has shut them down, said, we're not talking about that, that. You can't do that to Jackie Goldberg. And she took the floor and she made a stand. And I thought it was pretty dramatic. And I thought it was pretty striking and effective. She called out the process.
Never in her 30 years, Tony, has she seen something like this. She's been through 4 redistricting experiences. Oh man, it was gorgeous.
I mean, she jumped in and made a dramatic entrance.
Yeah.
And they started to talk about the maps and certain little tweaks. And then she just swooped in there and she's like, wait, why are we talking about this before we figured out how 2 and 4 are? Like, we can't talk about these assets and these changes without knowing who's who.
She's good at saying the quiet parts loud.
And then later, it came up again where they started making some changes and she just jumped in there. It's something that has been very much needed. Commissioner Cogna, appointed by Paul Krikorian, seemed very appreciative of having somebody to tag team with. All in all, it was a very good, fresh development, just because more than anything, we need somebody there to fact check the lies and to hold the process accountable. And throughout this whole process, we've seen this change where early on in the line drawing process, the issue of incumbency came up. People were getting drawn back into their districts. And Fred Ali openly said, I want to ask the city attorney, what can we consider incumbency? And brought up, hey, I just want to note that if we unite this Armenian community, it might impact an incumbent and draw them out of their district. And he again brought up incumbents when Commissioner Hune asked for him to explain what incumbents are. So it's just really fascinating to see that happen. And then when Raman and Krikorian can come into focus in the LA Times, Chair Ali says, we don't take incumbency into account. It's against our commission's values, as if earlier that week he didn't take incumbency into account. And he brought that up on Wednesday, that we don't take incumbency into account. And Jackie Goldberg pushed back on that. And that's just something extremely, extremely important, because the commission is lying to people. And I don't say that lightly, but it's just maddening. And we need to have people on this commission willing to speak up. So it's definitely a fresh emerging issue.
And one thing I forgot to mention, she called for an additional special meeting, because part of the argument has been, we're basically running out of time. They sort of put this stuff in and then it's like, well, there's no more time to change it. She's saying, no, we need more time. This is not just going to be pushed off to the end and then pushed off the edge. And, I don't know if that'll happen, but it sort of gives the lie to the notion of like, well, we're just at the mercy of the schedule and we've run out of things to do.
Yeah, nothing has been scheduled. Something to keep an eye on today, and a very, very good, important point, because that was her main ask, is let's devote a meeting to this. Really quickly, I just want to cover a few issues before we turn to the questions and answers. So as has been said, please throw your questions in the chat so we're ready to go. You can also find the link to the toolkit where you can dial into the meeting right now. It's not clear if we're going to have a fully accessible public comment period. Well, they'll be taking people in order. More than likely, it sounded like it's going to be like it was on Wednesday, where they call every 4th person. So it may not matter if you get in line early. But if you want to, just go ahead and go for it.
Was it every fourth person, or was it every fourth homeowners association? I don't remember what they said. It was one of those two.
Homeowners associations are people, my friend.
Yes.
I mean, they're probably incorporated, so they're people.
Mm-hmm.
You can also come up with creative names for your Zoom. I called in as Fred Lies on Wednesday, so please feel free to borrow that.
And I have been ruined.
So,
okay, we have two other topics.
The other two topics, South LA, this has been a huge issue. If you've paid any attention to current past redistricting, the redistricting cycle of 2012 is what haunts us all. Herb Wesson retaliated against his colleagues Jan Perry and Bernard Parks by stripping their districts of significant assets. This has been something that has been, on the back burner. As this map has moved forward, it seemed as though, there was a bit more of a green light to start talking about assets. And CD8 started speaking about how we need to get Exposition Park and USC back in our district. And CD9 has kind of pushed back against that a little bit. But very interestingly, at Wednesday's meeting, when this issue came up, Chair Ali said, this is a political decision. And I think it's best dealt with in council chambers. So I don't want to talk about it.
Oh, that's a political decision? Unlike everything else we've been talking about?
Yeah. He keeps on pointing to random bad things they're doing or failing to do and saying that it's a political decision. Really disheartening, because if you're here for any reason, it's to have the freedom to explore these issues free from the complete domain of elected officials. They are still very much involved in this process, but at least you can vet these. It's really disappointing. I think the most interesting thing that happened at yesterday's meeting is there were two callers who did not identify them being within a certain organization, quite clearly speaking to the same talking points, mentioning Kevin De Leon and his mayoral run, Karen Bass running for mayor, being the former executive director of COCO, Marquise Harris Dawson being the current or recent ED of COCO before he became a council member. And they said, we shouldn't listen to anybody from COCO, and the commission shouldn't allow them to speak at these meetings. We all got to check our biases at the door, but I think we can agree that is extremely absurd. And it was really interesting to hear them say that CD8 was trying to harm Council District 14 and Kevin De Leon. And it was really interesting to see the rollout of initial endorsements for Karen Bass lacked Curran Price's name on it. He is, of course, facing a district that is primarily Latinx, facing a Latino opponent. So maybe he's trying to keep himself ingratiated to many wings of LA politics. Very, very interesting to see that CD 8 and 9 are openly battling like that. And it's something to keep an eye on at today's meeting. And I don't think that kind of outcome, I don't think Chair Ali saying this is a political decision would necessarily have happened if Mark RidleyThomas did not get indicted earlier that day. I really do wonder if the vacuum that's been created by his absence is allowing a open scrum to happen over South LA assets. I think that Council District 14 has a keen interest in South LA staying the way it is, because if Curran Price loses USC and Exposition Park, what's he going to ask for? He only has so many directions to go to. He can't go east. So is he going to go north and get more of downtown LA? I don't think Kevin De Leon's going to want to give a block of downtown LA to Curran Price beyond that which he has to. So that might be why they find themselves in a unique alliance at the moment. The last thing I wanted to mention was immediately after this conversation where Chair Ali says, asset conversation is no good for us. They go to the West Valley district, the unassigned district that is, for the nearly 75% non-white that is park poor, has no assets except for the Sepulveda Basin. And out of nowhere, they say, there have been a lot of people from Encino saying they want the Sepulveda Basin, so let's give them the Sepulveda Basin. It's only 150 people. Absolutely maddening, and you've probably seen that a lot of the Valley neighborhood councils have been up in arms about this. The Reseda Neighborhood Council, props to them for having multiple meetings this week to produce multiple CIS statements so they can speak on this issue. Keep an ear out for them at the top of this meeting. I am sure they are going to have a very fiery public comment to match their fiery CIS statement. Any comments or thoughts from y'all on the West Valley?
It just seems like they're the most naked of all of the, I mean, I guess there's a lot of nudity going on. It's pretty profane, but a lot of just naked, just asset shifting. I mean, on the last meeting where they pulled out this Sepulveda Basin, and Fred Ali, if I'm remembering this the right meeting, there's a lot of stuff going on, saying, I think we have consensus on this. And clearly, people were pushing back. And, luckily, there are the neighborhood councils in the area are waking up. They're really angry. They're pushing back. I have to doubt that it will affect what Fred Ali does, but this is only the first step.
There was I just wanted to mention there was a great article in the Daily News that came out yesterday from Liz Chu, at Reporter Liz. You can go find that. I just want to mention that because it does have some great background on this specific issue. Tony?
I mean, I think it just kind of speaks to the way that kind of throughout the process, I think there's been a desire by the chair and so forth to treat this as like a technical process and to want to treat it as, really, this isn't about politics. This is about, a lot of technical things with population and borders and so forth. But as we're seeing now, this is a power grab. And, it's Sepulveda Basin. It's a land grab. Somebody sees it. Somebody wants it for their district. And they've decided that the residents of this, new West Valley district, which I think is currently labeled CD3, they feel like they're not going to be able to stop them and they're going to take it. So, it's all politics. Everybody wants those assets that they can use to get attention, to fundraise, etc. And if they can get them, they want them.
I think a big thing is the obfuscation that this commission is providing. We didn't get a motion from somebody, let's move the Sepulveda Basin. We didn't have Chair Ali saying, let's do this. It started with Frank Cardenas, the executive director, saying, we got a lot of comments, so let's talk about this. Very, very weird, almost like somebody didn't want to have it attributed to them. The lack of decision with districts 2 and 4 essentially gives us two different maps. We're not really working with one map, and that's what Jackie Goldberg got to. And I think if you look over to the East Valley and the large Armenian population out there that elected the first Armenian American to LA City Council, they're in the horrible place of not knowing whether they're going to lose that representative or that they're going to keep him, but their community is going to be split between 3 different districts. And that's insane. These 2 districts are being put in the worst position possible, not just the council member, but the constituents. And they don't even have the benefit of knowing how screwed they are or which way they're getting screwed and how to fight back specifically. So with that, I think it's a good time to stop so that we can get some questions. And I don't know if you've had a chance to keep an eye on particular questions that have jumped out.
Yeah, we don't have any at the moment. I guess I have a question, though, which is that if I'm feeling a little beat down by this process and just seeing white supremacy happen in real time, can you lift me out of my funk?
Yes. As we talked about last week, we have an ultimate reverse Uno card here. These lines could be redrawn whenever. There's actually nothing in the charter that stops us from drawing lines more frequently than every 10 years. So maybe we get the census post-enumeration undercount analysis next year. We have a new council elected and we decide to redraw the lines. We could do that. Unfortunately, we'd have to go through the same commission process. But we could also get something on the ballot, like charter reform, increasing the size of city council, and doing so with a fully independent redistricting commission. So that is our big, broader hope. But in this narrow situation we got, these maps are just recommendations. The commission has made a mockery of the process. This entire thing is up in the air, and we will see very big changes between now and next week, and between then and when council adopts this damn thing. But most importantly, the commission is putting together a report. And if you were paying attention on Wednesday, you heard Commissioner Cogna bring up, hey, I've been listening to comment and keeping track, and there have been like 70 people out of these 300 specifically bring attention to the Nithya Raman Valley District thing. Why aren't we talking about that? And that tells me that Commissioner Cogna is already thinking ahead to the report that's going to come out. Commissioner Cogna is probably going to be writing a minority report expressing everything that was wrong with this process. And he's going to need evidence to point to. And he's going to be able to hold the commission accountable when they produce their majority report and say, hey, that's actually not what was reflected in comment. So your comment is very much going to be a part of this report that goes to council. This is not just a map that goes to them. It's a map with a rationale, an explanation of the process, what went down, what the public said. So if you don't speak up, it's just going to be a bunch of HOA saying the map was great and you did it with a fully transparent process. Great job. Council should adopt this.
Yeah.
And instead, we're going to have a split decision here, and we're going to be able to say, no, there were a whole lot of people who said otherwise. And
if you haven't read that J. Caspian King piece in the New York Times from yesterday, I think, or 2 days ago, maybe, about the role that homeowners associations play in LA politics and California politics, it's a banger. You got to find it. I'll find the link and post it. We have two other questions. One is from our friend Calexity. Can I ask about the schedule? O'Farrell sent out 3 hearings next week. Can folks comment at those or no? I guess 2 hearings next week and 1 the following week. Rob, do you know, or Tony, do you know the answer to that?
We've got 2 hearings coming up this week. One on Monday, the 18th, that will be a discussion of proposed amendments. We have one scheduled for Thursday, which is the final vote on a map. There's an LAUSD meeting very similar for their commission on Wednesday. So I don't know if O'Farrell was sending out all 3 of those meetings or what. But the third and final hearing that is currently scheduled is for the 28th, at which they will approve that report that I mentioned a few minutes ago. So there are 3 remaining hearings, unless Jackie Goldberg works her magic today and musters out an additional hearing, as Tony mentioned, to specifically talk about those districts. But as of now, there are 2 map-related meetings on the schedule. I think it's very fluid situation. Depending on how much progress they make today and Monday, we might very well see another meeting plop up on the calendar, because they are on a hard deadline of getting a report to council by the 29th. And they need to give the staff a solid 5-6 days to actually put together that report, which will be an insane pace for them. But you can't put together a report on a map until the map's done.
So our next question is for both of you and for me, is the mainstream LA media doing a good job of covering this? Oops. I mean, at least from what I've seen, it's been pretty scattershot. It's still mainstream media. They have the people that they are protecting, that they have always protected. It seems to me like there's more attention being drawn to this than in 2012, but it's hard for me to say because I'm interested. I am trying to pay attention. So, Tony, what do you think?
I think they've covered bits and pieces. I have not seen anybody from LA, unlike J. Caspian King, who I think really started to get into it, try to get at the story behind the story. Like, what are the real dynamics playing out here, and who is trying to do what and get what and do what to whom? I think that the way to get that has been more, stuff like following Rob and so forth. I think that, I think mainstream media has been pretty slow to call out sort of what's going on and, maintain kind of a neutral stance. And I think the process, we were talking earlier about obfuscation and making it feel technical. Like that's what the people who are trying to pull things here want, is to make it seem like, just a process and a couple of fights here and there over assets, as opposed to getting at the power dynamics. So, we usually make fun of how New York Times gets LA wrong, but in this time, I feel like New York Times really scooped LA media and got it right when LA media has not been on it.
I know, they really blew up my stereotype. It was confusing. Rob, what do you think?
I think we've gotten a lot of coverage in the last month. Before that, there was painfully little, and I think that's unfortunate because it would have helped get increased engagement. People don't really take this stuff seriously until the census data comes out, and they don't start freaking out like their hair's on fire until the maps come out. So because the data came late, because the first maps came late, we're getting a very condensed, fiery focus on LA City redistricting. And I agree with what both of you said as far as the coverage not necessarily being that deep, not really getting into some of the more outrageous aspects of the process. It is weird that like the chair is able to do this political decision thing, that punt, that he's able to lie about not taking incumbency into account, to say that they had a fully transparent line drawing process. Those are the kind of things that you would hope that might be covered by our local press, but have actually received absolutely nothing. So maybe the LA Times editorial board will weigh in at some point. I don't know. I think that some of our media likes to let things get bad before they cover it, because it's a whole lot more interesting when shit goes off the rails.
Yeah, I also feel like there's a fear of naming what's happening and being honest about it, and that being described as an activist. I don't know. I can't think of the dog whistle for this, but anybody who's actually saying how fucked up stuff is, that they're writing with an opinion or an
bias.
a bias. Thank you. That's what it is.
Yeah, I mean, even for us public commenters calling in, if you've got something that the hive mind doesn't like, you are, one, not a resident of the city of LA.
That's right.
Two, organized by an illegitimate group, Ground Game LA, or DSA LA.
Right.
And three, that's actually all a lie, because in reality, you're a fucking bot.
Right.
And a communist bot at that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just all fun.
Yeah. You're a bot who somehow also doesn't live in LA. My bots personally live in Nevada because of the taxes, but I don't know. It's fun. It's fun to be attacked by randos. I gotta say, I kind of love it.
But it's also kind of like the classic underbelly of LA politics, like whose voice should actually count and whose voice isn't actually a real voice. And the history of that is very, very ugly. But that's the subtext here.
Yep.
And
you
that's
don't belong
what's
if you're
plagued
not.
this city. Like, we have the horrible, ineffectual local government we do because for the last 30 plus years, they've been elected by about 10 to 30% of the population, who are typically whiter, wealthier, and older, and predominantly homeowners. I mean, in that old school system of politics, somebody like David Rue can just roll out and say, hey, I'm endorsed by all these people. All of these HOAs like me. Vote for me. That's usually enough in LA city politics, as long as you got the D next to your name. And that's not enough anymore. That's just simply not enough. And I think that's part of why they're freaking out. And the New York Times piece did a really great job of kind of getting at that broader dynamic.
Yeah. Well, we're right at 10, so we should head off. Oh, we got one more question. We have time for one more question?
Let's do it.
Have there been thoughts about how commissioners themselves may benefit from this new map?
There have. I mean, there's been some thoughts and wonders whether Richard Katz, who is the former assemblyman who is playing a very, very, very heavy hand in the Valley region. He actually, for a time, helped lead the secession movement. He is going in hard for Bob Blumenfield. And interestingly, in all of those early maps, he was drawn into Nithya Raman's district more often than Nithya Raman was. So there has been some thought, like, does this guy have an angle to running against Nithya Raman or finding somebody else to run against her in 2024? I think other, questions about how it might personally benefit them. Like, a lot of these commissioners are highly tied up in the nonprofit world, and are reliant on donations from people like Weingart or Liberty Hill. Weingart used to be headed by Chair Fred Ali. So a lot of money from his organization has flowed to some of these other commissioners. He's no longer the head there, but it is an important wrinkle to things. There is money that is distributed by council members to some of these organizations. Some of the reimagining policing money that was pared back is going to some of the heads of these organizations that are on the commission. I think there is wonder as to, maybe Commissioner Diaz, what, future aspirations she might have. And I think another big one that is bumping up on the schedule is wonder over, what's going to happen in CD10. Pastor Eddie Anderson was appointed by Herb Wesson and retained by Mark Ridley-Thomas. Herb Wesson obviously knew he was leaving. He was termed out. So he probably, made sure that Mark Ridley-Thomas was okay with him before. I've heard some rumblings that he might be the person that is angling to run in Mark Ridley-Thomas's seat. For the most part, people choose these commissioners because they're going to be loyalists. And because of that, they're a little bit reluctant to get somebody who has future political aspirations or an agenda. So those are maybe the few that I would highlight.
Yeah, it's not good. It's not good.
But you know what? There's a whole lot of activists who know what redistricting is now.
Yes.
And their phones, their smartphones are beginning to not autocorrect redistricting to redistributing.
Yes.
Which you might see in a lot of tweets. Like, that is progress. And this is really important because this is a wonky issue. And for people to be able to understand how redistricting directly impacts them, even when we're not in a highly partisan legislative body, it prepares them to be able to speak about bigger, broader issues like charter reform, which came up earlier as a potential outlet for just cleaning the whole fucking slate. We're not ever going to be able to do that until we can really dig in on some of these systemic issues. And I think this is all, it's painful, but there is some reason for hope. It's if you're not at the table at this kind of thing, you're going to be feasted upon. And we've seen that consistently. So it looks like the meeting is in.
Oh, get in there, folks.
So make sure you call in and speak your voice. We got a toolkit there if you need help with your talking points, but just do it. You're so important, and we're going to have an impact. Thank you to Tony. Okay, Tony first. Thank you both. Thank everyone who is watching this. Thank you to Shelby and Caroline who have helped make this happen. It's the reason we're on screens right now. Keep asking your questions. Rob's Unrig LA is a great source for this information. You can do deep dive if you want to watch the real-time commentating. It's very delightful and enjoyable. So big plug. Of course, I'm sure people who are watching this are very familiar with Rob. So we're done. Thanks all.
Bye.
We'll see you again.